everyone. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us on this very warm afternoon. My name is Jessica Telford, and I'm the marketing coordinator for Friends of Royal Alberta Museum Society, or FRAMS for short. We're very pleased to co-present with the Royal Alberta Museum Resurgent Practices in Beadwork, Tradition, and Hide Tanning with Jessica Sanderson-Barry, the first in RAM's new Indigenous Artist Spotlight series. FRAMS is a registered charity and not-for-profit membership organization that promotes and supports the museum in a variety of ways. Now that the museum is welcoming visitors back, it's a perfect time to become a FRAMS member and gain access to a year of great events, discounts, and unlimited admission to the museum. We'd love for you to join our community in support of the museum and programs for all Albertans. To learn more about FRAMS, to become a member, or to donate in support of free events like this one, please visit frams.ca. Before we kick things off today, I have a few housekeeping items to mention. Along the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button. Please feel free to use the chat window to make comments or have discussions. Also, you can reach out to FRAMS supports in the chat window if you have any tech issues. Closed captioning is available. There's an option to activate or deactivate it along the bottom menu bar. And just to let you know, we're recording today's events, and in the next few days, a link to review the recording will be available on the RAM and FRAMS websites. At the end of the talk, you will see a short 5-question survey in your web browser. We would appreciate it if you could take a couple moments to provide us with your feedback. And that's it for housekeeping items. I'm going to pass things over now to Emma Knight, Assistant Curator of Indigenous Studies at Royal Alberta Museum. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. My name is Emma. I'm the Assistant Curator of Indigenous Studies. I'm a settler and first-generation immigrant, and it's my privilege to live, work, and play here in Nêhiyaw-iskwêw. It's the traditional territories of the Nêhiyaw, Nakota Sioux, and homeland to the Métis. Edmonton has long been a gathering place for generations of Niitsitapi, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Saulteaux, Dene, Inuit, and many other Indigenous peoples. I give thanks to all of the elders and knowledge keepers I have the honor of working with here at the museum. And I commit to making space for Indigenous voices, knowledge, and presence within the museum so that Indigenous histories and the relationships of this land can be shared by those who know them best. So before I begin today, I feel it's only right that we take some time to reflect on the news that broke last week, that a further 751 unmarked graves were found at Nêhiyaw Indian Residential School on the Cowessess First Nation. These are not just numbers, they're children. Again, this is heartbreaking, and this news continues to have ripple effects throughout Indigenous communities. We cannot underestimate the pain and trauma that this news has and will continue to have as more and more former residential school sites are being searched. This is the history that Indigenous communities have known for generations and that settler society has largely ignored. This is a time of reckoning and a time for change. And I call on my fellow settlers here today to join me in educating yourself, talking to your friends and family, amplifying and supporting Indigenous voices and organizations, and donating to Indigenous-run organizations working with survivors and their families. Now I'd like to ask everybody to join me in a moment of silence to honor the lives of these children and also to honor the survivors. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over now to Elaine Alexie, who's our Curator of Indigenous Studies here at RAM, to introduce our guest speaker, Jessica. Thank you.
Masicho. Thank you, Emma. Jungwinzi Shalakat, Elaine Alexie Vilji, at the Jetsat, Gwichin Dinchu, Juktrin Osli. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to this virtual space. My name is Elaine Alexie, and I'm the Curator of Indigenous Studies here at the Royal Alberta Museum. I am happy to be with you all here today. To continue our celebration of Indigenous History Month, today's special event also marks our launch of our Indigenous Artist Spotlight series, where we create space and invite Indigenous artists to share their stories, their culture, and art practices from across Alberta, Canada, and beyond. So today's special guest is Nêhiyaw artist Jessica Sanderson-Barry. Tansei, Jessica, welcome to this virtual space.
Thank you.
So very happy to have you here join us and to share your creative journey with us. So to begin, I would like to give you the space to introduce yourself. Who are you and where are you from?
Hansai, hello. My name is Jessica Sanderson-Barry. I'm from Jaka-Sapesumban, means reflection in the water. It's in Treaty 6 territory. It's about 45 minutes east of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So that side of my family is my late grandmother's side. As for my late grandfather's side, they're from the Muskogee area. So I currently reside in Edmonton, Alberta, and I'm the owner and designer of J-Shine Designs. And so thank you so much for holding this space to allow me to talk about my art practice and high tanning, and I look forward to holding this space and this kitchen table talk with you, Elaine, and everybody else here.
Yes, absolutely. It's just been such a, leading up to this, like we're just so excited to have you. So I look forward to what we talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
I think to begin, as it's mentioned at the earlier of today's talk, giving recognition to what has been unfolding the past month across, Turtle Island, affecting, both sides of the border in Canada and the US. It's having to do these events, we kind of have to acknowledge how it affects us as Indigenous peoples, as Indigenous artists, as Indigenous women. How have you been able to cope with all this in light with everything going on and for you and, reflecting on that?
Yeah, thank you so much for raising that. I think for me, first and foremost, I want to send prayers to everybody who's grieving, the families, and like those children. It's been really, really difficult to fathom what has happened in the last few weeks. And it's just been really difficult for me as Nêhiyaw-iskwêw, and my late grandmother, Clara Sanderson. She was a residential school survivor, and I just want to show you her picture. So this is my beautiful late grandma, Clara. I was raised in her house, and she attended Gordon Residential School in Saskatchewan. So she was sent away about 2.5 hours from her community, along with all of her brothers and sisters. So these so-called schools have really impacted our family significantly. And I see it through the lost connection, through culture, through our language. So, when I found out the news of Kamloops, I was actually out in Fort McMurray First Nation, and I was actually tanning hides with my mentor. And when we heard the news and we started seeing the flood of social media, it was really triggering. It just brought me back to my late grandmother, her truth and her horrific, treatments of being in that school. For me, it's important for me to continue to tell her story and ensure that we never forget her lived experience, and to never forget the horrific abuses she's gone through. And, you know, when I heard of the news of the Kamloops, like it brought me back to the TRC. I was able to attend that in 2015, and there we just heard stories upon stories of, you know, the lost children at these schools, but they were unable to account for the number of children or what that number looked like. So it's just really hard for, I know everybody's grieving in their own way, and it's really hard, has been hard to cope. And, you know, when I heard of Kamloops, I was tanning hides, and the way that I coped was tanning hides with my mentor, who's also a residential school survivor. And to hear that news and be there with them, I was able to cope, because essentially tanning hide is healing. It's healing in so many different ways. And I just wish everybody could have that feeling and experience that connection with the Mooswa, with the moose. So, so tanning hides was a way for me to cope. And I've been tanning hides here and there the last few weeks, but also beading. Beading has helped me ground me, and it was a way to help me give back and raise funds for the Residential School Survivor Society. With that said, and also raising awareness and letting people know in my circles, like how they can help, what ways they can donate, who to support, ways that they can buy orange t-shirts from organizations that donate 100% of the proceeds to societies like the Residential School Survivor Society. So definitely it's been really difficult for all of us. And, you know, those numbers are going to continue to, you know, grow. And it's just like, it's breaking our communities, and it's just finding different ways to cope. So, and finding, so that's why I'm just thankful that this is still happening, because this is still healing for me, you know, like talking about my art. And my hopes is to help healing for others, whoever's listening to this.
Absolutely. And touching on that subject of both like beading and hide tanning for you, like these are practices that, you know, can help so many people right now. And just coming together in this way and sharing this way, you know, coming to share stories, you know, and helping that process. I'm just so happy that we are able to help you in that too. And for the audience members, you know, willing to listen and just to learn and just to hear the experiences for Indigenous artists like Jessica, you know, sharing that story is bringing that awareness and bringing that light. Your work, I've been following you for many years and I'm a huge fan of your work, and you have such an amazing presence on social media. And I think one of the most amazing things that you do effectively is that, you know, you do these fundraising, you do these awareness building, you do these, you know, the donations that you do. It's just incredible that you're able to reach far and wide. And like, and for those folks that don't know, like Jessica is both on Instagram and on Facebook. We share that information on the blog on our website, but why is community so important part of your work and your practice as an Indigenous artist?
I think in terms of community, how it started was I attended, I guess I should talk to you about a little bit about beading, where it started, because I think that really ties in well with community. So I attended a Miskwachee Academy, and back then, well, it's a high school in Edmonton, and they have a lot of Indigenous like course education wise. So I attended fashion class, and I was taught by how to bead brick stitch and loom beadwork and sewing star blankets by late Hilda Saddleback from Muskwachees. So this is what was the foundation of where my love for beads started. Beading requires patience, and there were times where I tried to teach myself flat beadwork. I didn't have a mentor, so it was just self-taught, you know, and this technique was very, very challenging. And it actually didn't turn out the way it was supposed to be. And so I actually stepped away from beadwork for a few years just because it didn't turn out the way I envisioned it. So I stepped away, but many years later, I actually returned to beadwork in 2014. I did a couple collections there, and it wasn't quite, I wasn't at a point where it truly reflected my self-expression in the way I wanted it to. So I kind of thought, let's go, okay, I'll take a step back again and I'll from beadwork. So then again in 2017, and since this time, beadwork has been my art practice ever since. So as a Nêhiyaw-iskwêw, like beadwork has awakened my spirit. You know, there was a time where we could not practice these traditional practices, and beadwork was a way of self-expression. And so it's basically just a self-expression of who I am and where I come from as a Nêhiyaw-iskwêw. You know, beading is a way of healing, and it continues to help me heal. With that, kind of like going into how community helped me get to where I am right now. We have such an amazing community on Instagram, and that's where I started. I started little, you know, J-Shine Designs, or at J-Shine Creations it started at, and then I changed it to J-Shine Designs. But just finding mentors and finding other amazing, beautiful bead artists, and them really uplifting me in a way that I started to gain confidence in my beadwork, and just learning different techniques from other beadworkers, like them supporting me on like where to get certain supplies. So definitely there's like an amazing community out there on social media. So if you are looking to bead or just starting to bead, I really highly recommend just reaching out to your community and asking questions about where to get certain supplies and stuff like that.
Awesome. One of the things that I really notice about your work, you have a really distinctive style. So can you be able to share with us, you know, where does your inspiration come from for some of the designs that you do?
Yeah, so most of my time is spent at my kitchen table. So this is where my table is. So it's beading at the kitchen table or outside in my backyard. So this is my safe space where I create designs, and some of those designs come to me while I'm thinking about my childhood, specifically spending time out at my late grandparents' place out in, they have some land about 16 acres near Pigeon Lake, and that land is for us, all the grandchildren, all the great grandchildren. And it's a place where I went to quite frequently during the summers, and it's where you go fetch for water. There's no toilets, you know, there's outhouses. Electricity was just put in there, I believe, like in the early 90s or late 80s. But just thinking of those times of spending time at my late Chapman's house, I think about like the land, the medicine surrounding that house. I think about all the birch trees and all the different flowers on that land. So when I create a design or try to bring that design to life, I have to be in a good mind space, and I have to be in a space where I have that good energy, and it's all around me. So for example, when I'm beading at my table, the sun rises from the east. And so my favorite time to bead is in the mornings, where the sun is just coming through the window, and the way that the sun kind of hits my hands and just warms them in that way, it just gives me energy and that power. So that's where most of my work that I do bead are in those two spaces. But one design I actually created was my monarch butterfly moose earrings. I don't know if you've seen those, but those ones,
Incredible.
those ones are my favorite. And these earrings were made after I lost my Musum, which is my late grandmother. I just showed you her brother. And he was a phenomenal knowledge keeper, elder back home. So after the funeral, it was really hard to pick up my beads, and that design actually came to me a week or so after. But I wanted to embody that transition from going from the physical world into the spiritual world through that butterfly design. So beading has really helped me grieve, and this is really how powerful, you know, beadwork can really be to those who are grieving.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I really like how you shared how, you know, when you start beading and when you're getting into that place, like it has to be, you know, a grounding space. You know, it has to be where you're at a good place to bead. It kind of seems like a consistent way for many other beaders too. You know, that's how you should be, in a good place. You know, you're putting your love, you're putting your energy into pieces that, you know, they're going to be shared with the world in some way. So it's really cool that you shared that. And I just love how that's how you start your day. That's your routine. And that's so beautiful. And that's very powerful. Yeah, I draw inspiration from that, because I'm like, you know, that's why I think people can get a sense of, you know, why it's so powerful, what you do in terms of your practice. So through some of your beadwork, you explore various types of motifs or floral designs. What do these, and you kind of, you touched on it really briefly, some of the floral designs, and, you know, you spoke about your grandmothers, you know, do you try to capture some of that in the floral motifs as well? Like the old style beading, and looking at, you know, how you're drawing inspiration from that and recreating it, interpreting in a way that best represents you.
Yeah, so my chapan, late Agatha Gooden, she lived till she was 113 years old. So when I came into this world, I actually missed her about 2 years. So unfortunately, like, you know, when she actually did visit me in my dream once, I really cherished that time. And that was actually, she invited me to her kitchen table to talk. And she's
Wow.
very, like, she spoke very fluent Cree, like, and she was speaking Cree to me. And I'm like sitting at the table, like, just like drinking tea, like talking, enjoying my time with her. And that's never ever happened to me before, but I will always remember that dream. But the reason why I bring her up is she actually had the most beautiful embroidered moccasins. And within those moccasins, she had different flowers and embedded in that, those vamps. And the only thing that I had I don't have actually the physical moccasins, but just a picture of those moccasins. So the style was just in a way to honor her, and just to remember the path that she walked, and to honor her in a good way. You know, when I spend time with this design, it feels as though her spirit is around me, and I'm able to spend that time with her, with that design, with that pattern. Even though I didn't meet her in the physical world, it's in my bloodline to create, you know. Her blood is within my blood, and it's just like spending time with those patterns. It's spending time with her. So, and then in terms of other beading patterns, my late great grandmother, Jenny Lightning, that's her maiden name, but she was a phenomenal bead worker. And of course, like I didn't meet her in my life, but she just, I was able to look at, family members would send me pictures of her beadwork, and she beaded moccasins, beautiful hide jackets, and she was a phenomenal hide tanner. And so kind of just drawing inspiration from that, and I know she's with me. It comes through my hands, and I'm able to create those beautiful florals that embody them as well.
That's beautiful. On the blog post, you shared, you know, you were making that medallion upon your
yes.
graduation, and that you've the beautiful design that's inspiration from your chapan. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it's just beautiful, like your journey and how you started, and like you pushed through, you never gave up, even though you felt like it, but you still continued, and you persevered, and you created something so beautiful that represent, in tribute to your grandmother. And I saw that you picked it up. Do you have it with us today?
Oh, I do. So this was this is on home tanned hide, and this is embroidery. This is the first time I've ever done embroidery. And of course, when I explained, there was a time where I just had this part of this part done, and I still had this amount to go before my grad. And I remember I was like doing the embroidery like an hour before the ceremony. It was pretty intense, but honestly, I'm just thankful for my partner who encouraged me to keep on going and push through, despite like, the lines aren't perfect, but I learned to be kind to myself. And, I've never done embroidery ever in my life. And I feel as though I just wanted to honor her while I walk down that stage, because university is hard. It's hard to learn in an institution like that. And so I just wanted to honor her in a good way by wearing this.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's my favorite experience that you shared with us so far. So kind of moving on to the questions. One of the things that I really appreciate about your work is, how you share your knowledge, how you share, practices, but knowledge, but also bead history. And you kind of created this opportunity for other artists to have access to supplies that, otherwise would seem really hard to, especially here in Canada. And one of them is about, vintage and antique beads. And can you be able to share with us, what it's been like for you to kind of research and to, share that information about these types of beads?
For sure. So my first experience with the vintage beads and antique beads, I actually traveled to Los Angeles with my daughter. And she actually picked that place because me and her do like a mother-daughter trip every year. And I was like, pick a place and we'll go. And so we went to LA. So there I was like, okay, well, we're going to, go bead shopping. She didn't really like it, but she knew how important it was to me. So she really she was there with me. But there's actually this vintage bead shop. It kind of looked like a hole in the wall right in the fashion district. And there they have beautiful fabric little shops, tons, blocks and blocks of this fashion show stores. So when I found this vintage bead shop, I went in there and she had beads at over 100 years old. Different kinds of beads. So there were this different shapes, different kind of bugles, you can name it, she had it. And I spent quite a bit of money there. So I purchased what I can, because you can only purchase so much to bring back into Canada. So I went there, and that was when I first started exploring with vintage beads in my art practice. So I started using them and incorporating them in my designs. And then from there, a year later, I ran out of the vintage beads and I needed more. So I was like, Cadence, I was like, it's my daughter. It's like, let's go on a trip somewhere. Again, you pick the place, and she picked New York City. And I'm like, yes, New York City is a big, concrete jungle, but they have amazing bead stores there. And there's this one bead store, vintage bead store, where I walked into there and there was just boxes upon boxes of vintage beads. And I literally spent hours in there going through the beads, and of course, bringing some of those back home. And I remember when I left that store, I had about, I think 40 pounds of vintage beads. And I didn't bring like a rolly cart or like a luggage thing. He just gave us a real strong bag, and my daughter held one side and I held the other. We're trying to wave down a taxi. It was like crazy, and it was raining in our face. And I remember it's like, I was like, all for the beads, you know, these are gonna, you know, go to good people, you know, this beautiful art's gonna be made of this and it's gonna travel all around, you know. So brought those beads home, and I was able to actually share those beads with other bead workers through my website. So I actually expanded and started offering vintage beads. So some of those beads that I do offer, one of my favorite beads is I offered was steel cut, antique steel cut beads.
Yeah.
And so those ones are no longer in production, but they're actually attracted to a magnet. So that's how you can tell the authenticity of them. But it's really, really, really hard to find those. And you know, Elaine, like you can see them in the old artifacts, like embedded in those beautiful pieces, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so now like vintage beads actually hold, you know, they tell a story. They tell a story, and they're just so beautiful, just the different shapes and sizes and the colors, like you can't get some of those colors in the contemporary beads today. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like how I see these very special beads, whether it be vintage and antique, you know, I see them as a connection to our ancestors, you know, because of the things that they made in the past and how like places like museums and the collections, you know, some of these special pieces tells those stories. And that's where I draw my inspiration for some of my work as an artist, is looking at, you know, the old beads. And like some of them are just, you know, they're made at a time where obviously they're not made anymore, but they're just the colors, they're just so amazing. And like, yeah, so I have a deep appreciation for folks who also see the value in vintage and antique beads, because it's, you know, to use them and to remake pieces or to create your own inspiration from, you know, old style beading, but in a new way. You know, you're continuing on that storytelling, you know, of your family in a variety of ways. So that's so powerful. And I'm so appreciative that you're, through your business, that you offer that for other artists too, you know, to have access to it and to be able to get these types of supplies. Otherwise, you know, it's really hard to. So I want to ask you, what is your favorite bead size to work with and why?
my favorite bead size. So I think Charlotte's, a size 13, are definitely my favorite. Even size 15. I think you can get really a lot of detail within that if you're doing real detailed beadwork. And I don't know how many little vials of Charlotte beads I have, but my numbers are still growing. I don't have enough beads. You know, you need every color of every color hue.
Can you describe really quickly to folks who might not know what Charlottes are? What is a Charlotte bead?
So a Charlotte bead is, so there's different sizes of beads. So a standard bead size is probably about a size 11. So it's pretty standard that you see out there. So as the bead number goes up, the smaller the bead becomes. So you can see beads go all the way up to, I've seen like 26. I don't know if you've, Elaine, seen anything higher than that.
I
They're very
personally haven't.
micro.
Yes, they're tiny, tiny,
Or
tiny.
24. It's either 24 or 20. I can't remember, but they're very tiny micro beads. So so the bead that I enjoy working with is a Charlotte's, and the way that it's kind of cut like at an edge, and it has like a flat, and it's like, and the way that you place the beads, and sometimes that edge like cut, the light kind of glimmers on it and it reflects off, and it kind of gives you that sparkle and that shine. So that's what I really like about that bead.
Yeah, they're precious beads, and they're That's my favorite size as well, because I do find that it's easier to work with shapes and sizes. Obviously, I mean, working up to that size, getting comfortable being at a place where, you know, with your sewing skills, you know, it takes practice. But yeah, that's my favorite size and style. There's one more question here. I don't know if it's nearby. Because you were talking about the monarch butterfly earrings, do you have it nearby to show folks?
So those earrings are actually, I'm going to show you a picture of them. I don't know if you can see, but I don't have the actual physical ones. So they're essentially like the butterfly wings with home tanned hide fringe that, so if you want to see a closer look, they are on my Instagram at jshine designs.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on, I want us to kind of go into another area, which you mentioned earlier in the introduction of, you know, how this has really been helping you, is hide tanning. I think before we kind of get into that discussion, I want to ask to see if we could be able to share a video that Jessica has sent us to share for this presentation today about her hide tanning. And I think it would just, to show this, would just let people know about the process of hide tanning a little bit more.
Sure, I'll pull it up. Sorry, 1 second.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, that's such an awesome video. Thank you for sharing that with us and for letting it be part of today. So how did you get started in high tanning?
So in 2017, I attended the Wokotwin Nêhiyaw-iskwêw land-based course through the Faculty of Arts, the Faculty of Native Studies and Faculty of Law, where we learned how to tan hides in Sousa Creek near Grand Cache. So this is where we went through the whole process from start to finish. Within, I think, 3 days, we learned how to tan a hide from start to finish. So there's about 14 participants, and then there's quite a few faculty from the Native Studies and Faculty of Law. And just learning the different processes that are embedded in hide tanning was just like an eye opener for me. It felt like it was like a revitalization of cultural practices within myself. And then, so I learned how to tan hides for the first time with that community. And then in 2020, I actually left my professional career as an accountant and in July. And then 2 months later, it felt like, my life had slowed down completely. And then all of a sudden I was invited to my first, hide camp for that year. And then since then, it's been probably about 10 months in, and I've been to quite a few hide camps since then. So it's just learning where the hide camps are, learning about different hide tanners around the Edmonton area, and being able to share this practice with them, whether I have to travel a few hours away to Nêhiyaw-iskwêw cultural camps, or travel to Muskogee, or travel up north. My heart it's full when I, tan hides. And so since then, this past year has been really, really amazing in terms of me finding what I wanted to do in my life. It was very hard to leave financial stability to be a full-time artist. And so kind of like hide tanning really embodies who I am and where I come from. And just to kind of go back, as I was learning hide tanning, I learned that my late great grandmother and my grandfather, which is here, George, they tanned hides in the 1940s and 1930s. And he learned that practice from his mom. And just to know that, and that of course it was stopped, it wasn't passed down to me, but I just feel like practicing that traditional practice, it gives me hope for the future, for my children, for my nieces and nephews. So hide tanning, we'll get into it later, but pretty much like that's where it's all started, was in Sousa Creek in 2017.
That's amazing how it just, the door opened and it's led you down this path of, now you're in the capacity of being in multiple places with, different communities and, being on that path to helping other folks. What would you, for folks that are wanting to learn, what would be your advice of, how can they get started? What would they need to do in terms of like tools or supplies, or what they, to think about in terms of, starting down that path?
For sure. So advice for other Indigenous people who want to learn, or anybody who wants to learn, I would highly suggest, if you're on Instagram, that's an amazing hide community. So I really want you to follow other hide tanners like Cries Over Moose Hides. She's out of Ontario, and I've actually tanned hides with her at Nêhiyaw-iskwêw cultural camps. There's Peggy Lee out of Muskogee. She's from Ermineskin Cree Nation. And I'm just going to name a couple handles for those that want to follow these individuals. There's Amber under Hines, H-E-I-N-S. There's Megs Anishinaabe, Amber Sandy, Hunter the Trapper. There's BZ Gray. My good friend Alyssa, I just met her a couple weeks ago. She's a Métis artist as well. So just reaching out to them, and they actually share on their social media some of the different stages of tanning hides. And we've actually built a really an amazing support system. So if I have a question and my mentor can't help me, they are just with open arms. They let me know like what they would do in that circumstance, because obviously tanning hides is a labor of love, but also there's so much that goes into it as well. So, so I really encourage you to reach out to our community, our hide community, you know, build relationships, reach out to the ones who have been doing it for a long time, find your mentors. You know, I was taught by some amazing knowledge keepers, and they are really supportive in my journey. And I could, you know, how crazy is technology now? I'll just send them a picture if I have a question like, oh, am I scraping too much here? I'll send them a picture, and they're really like encouraging that way. So there are actually some hide camps that happen. For example, Ghanaian cultural camps. They're based out of Coal Lake, just outside, 45 minutes outside of Coal Lake. They have 2 hide camps a year. So I really encourage you, if you're in the Edmonton area, they have one there. And then reaching out to me, like if you want to come tan hides, come with me, we can go together. So just reaching out to your circles, and just don't be scared. I know that tanning hides is just really, there's not a lot of people who do it around this area. So just kind of like, once you make a connection, you're going to make other connections, and your connections are just going to continue to grow.
Absolutely. I'll certainly take you up on your offer someday. I would love to join you at a hide tanning camp. The process of hide tanning is a very physical process. And for you, what was your most valuable teachings that you've received, you know, through that? And like you're a beginner, you're getting more skills, you know, what is the most valuable teaching moment that you could share for others and understanding what it's like, you know, to be in community with folks, to be in this space, to be on the land, and to be around everything that is so informative of who we are as Indigenous peoples?
I feel for me like I didn't think I was going to be where I was a year ago. You know, I didn't think I was going to be able to do this and, you know, practice. And hide tanning has really taught me so much. Well, obviously, like I use home tan hide in all of my pieces of jewelry, and I outsource that to people who make the hides. And it was important for me to support their livelihood, and, you know, knowing that the money that I'm giving them for that hide is going to feed their families and keep that money within their community. So supporting community economic development was important for me. So like in terms of like hide tanning, like teachings, you know, working with those different mediums in my art practice, it was important for me to have that relationship with the moose, and really understanding the fundamental practices when traditionally tanning that hide. Because there's certain proper protocols and proper care that goes into, from harvest to, you know, cutting the meat to getting the tongue out, which we eat, you know, and the moose knows which we eat, and to the brain that's used for tanning the hide, to the hind legs for tools, and the sinew that comes out of the leg, using for sewing. So it really like is important for me to understand and respect the animal and use everything within that animal. And I honestly, like, I'm just so thankful that I have mentors who were able to teach me those practices, and being able to now teach within my own kin those traditional practices. So in terms of teachings, I can recall just being mindful, like when I'm tanning hides, like just being mindful of that spirit's around, right, all the time. So being mindful of how you're talking, you know, you're sharing stories with the other hide tanners, but being respectful and always like clearing your space, you know, always having a tidy workspace and cleaning up after yourself. So those are some of like the practices that I've learned and within hide tanning.
One of the one of the most I feel powerful things that you share through your social media is how you're reclaiming space in urban places. Like urban hide tanning, how you've literally transformed your backyard into, you know, fleshing hides, dehairing hides, scraping hides, and now smoking hides. Like that is incredible. And I just thought that, you know, that act is so powerful. So why is it important aspect for Indigenous peoples and artists like yourself to reclaim that space, the land, and to reclaim this practice of hide tanning and beadwork traditions now?
I definitely seen like this shift, especially since COVID hit, right? Like everybody's like resorting to social media to keep updated within our circles. But I feel like there's a time has shifted and people are returning, like life had slowed down, right? COVID had put a blanket over the world and slowed us right down. That's what made me realize like what was important to me and what values was important. And, you know, working at a job that making really good money just wasn't that, I needed something else. So obviously, like I left my job, I do hide tanning, but I didn't expect to bring it back and using my backyard to tan those hides. So at the video that you all just seen, I was actually smoking my first deer hide. And that process I brought from start to all the way to finish. But to be able to bring that home and smoke my first hide with my own family and with my nieces and nephews around, with my auntie around, it just felt like it was that transmission of knowledge to the little ones, right? They see that. And my hopes is that continues to, and they tan hides when they get older, or even now, like I'm caring for my 5-year-old niece, and she comes to the hide camps with me and she knows like the terminology. She's like, oh, auntie, let's go scrape a hide, or are you fleshing? You know, she's 5 years old. And that knowledge is already in her brain. So just planting those little seeds to the younger generation is really critical to make sure that this practice does not go away. You know, that we're honoring our relatives who did this work. And so doing it in my backyard, it's, you know, I live in an area where there's not many Indigenous people around, but it's just to start that conversation with other people. You know, I live in a multicultural area, but I have a moose hide on a frame in my backyard at the moment, and I'll be scraping that. Hopefully in August, they'll be ready, and I'll be working on that hide. But definitely it's a learning process. I'm by any means not a professional hide tanner. I still have so much to learn in this practice. But
one of the questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll let you finish.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
One of the questions that we had coming in was, are you planning on hosting a hide camp?
You know what? I really thought about taking space up in Edmonton. I really thought of, you know, discussing with other people too, like taking space up at the ledge grounds, you know, just taking that space up and doing a hide camp, because I know there's other individuals who do urban hide camps in the city. Like Amber Sandy did one, I believe, in Toronto, which is amazing, amazing. You know, others did one in Yellowknife, right, and reclaiming that space. So, you know, one day my hopes is to see that happen here in the city. You know, whoever asked me that question, send me an email. Let's make it happen.
Awesome. I am just really conscious of time right now.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I would just like to say hi cho, masi cho, Jessica, for sharing your incredible story. I'm so grateful that you took time out of your busy day and travels to share your story with us today. If there was any parting words that you would like to share with folks in terms of your beadwork story, your practice, and also your hide tanning journey, what would you like to share with folks?
For those who are trying to start beadwork or do hide tanning, I really encourage you not to give up, because it can be really discouraging, especially when things don't turn out the way that you want them to. Like this deer hide, it had 20 plus holes that I had to sew. But you know what? It's about be kind to yourself, because essentially it can't be hard, because everything's not going to come just perfect, right? You just have to continue to build and work. But for those who are trying to revitalize their cultural practices, I really strongly advise that just reach out to those people, on social media who are doing that practice, and just start building community and connections that way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica. For some folks who, we do have a feature of Jessica on the Royal Alberta Museum website through like a Q&A blog post. You could read more of her responses on there. And it was just shared in the chat of, how to follow her on Instagram and Facebook. Again, thank you so much, Jessica. I look forward to seeing more of your creative journey. And yeah, and I look forward to one day of tanning hides with you.
Yes. Good. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Okay, absent.
So to join, just some housekeeping for our next event that we have at the Royal Alberta Museum. Our next online virtual event is entitled Unsettled: Indigenous Representation in Colonial Institutions. I will actively moderate a panel of Indigenous scholars on how Indigenous communities can be better represented by colonial institutions, and to examine the responsibility we all have in achieving equity and inclusivity. Join us July 15th at 6 p.m. for that event with the Friends of the Royal Alberta Museum. And I would like to also just give a quick shout out and say thank you so much for Friends for co-sponsoring this event with us, Jessica, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next event. Thank you all for joining today. Masicho.